Background gameplay footage of Beholgar was provided by Stage 3 Gaming, who I've obtained permission from to show their gameplay footage in this video. Please check out their channel. Here's their channel on the screen now, and links to their channel will be in the description. Thank you to Stage 3 Gaming for letting me use your gameplay footage of Beholgar for this review. As you may or may not know, I am a big Sword and Sorcery fan. I love Conan the Barbarian, I love his games, I'm a big fan of Amaro and all of Robert E. Howard's Conan adjacent books as well. I've watched almost all of the Sword and Sorcery movies that came out during the 80s and 90s as well. Naturally, after the literature and movie genre, exploring Sword and Sorcery games would be next, and that's when I found out about Beholgar, an indie Metroidvania platformer action game centered around the protagonist of the same name, Beholgar. Before we get to the actual review, I want to talk about the developer a tiny bit. Serkan Bakar has been creating games like this since 2016, so he's been at it for a while. Creating low-cost indie games is this guy's passion, it seems, usually of the action platformer variety. Most, if not all of his games have a mixed to positive rating. Let's get to the controversy surrounding his second game he released, which is GhoulBoy, Dark Sword of Goblin. From what I understand, the developer revoked keys sold by third-party websites after his game got ported to console and the price on Steam was adjusted upwards. As a result, he then revoked these game keys that were legally sold and obtained on bundle websites such as Fanatical, etc. He then asked consumers for them to email him for replacement keys before deleting the thread and censoring criticism against him for his actions on the Steam forums as well as on other forums. I'm sure there are more details involving this, but that's the gist of it. That's a very shady way of doing business and entirely anti-consumer, and he should be rightfully reamed and punished for doing so, but nothing has happened against him since that incident. I just wanted to let people know that this developer may not be all that he seems, and to caution others. Let's get to the story. There's not much story in this game. You are Beholgar, who has returned to his land after 20 winters away. When he returns, he finds out that an evil sorcerer has taken over the land, and Beholgar is the only one that can overcome the monster-infested lands and evil magic in order to restore the land and its people to how they were before the evil sorcerer took over. Simple story, simple premise. You don't need much more for a video game, nor do you need a super complex, overarching story for a sword and sorcery low fantasy setting. Having that sort of thing would complicate the game and kind of go against what's established for the sword and sorcery genre. Beholgar is a 2D side-scrolling pixel art action platformer Metroidvania, although a very bare-bones Metroidvania. You get a world map with about 6 or so locations that you have to visit to unlock. As you play more, you get blocked by paths that you'll have to come back to with upgrades you find further on into the level. Pretty simple stuff, pretty basic game. You get some different weapons such as an axe or spear, and combat is simple as well. Just hack and slash at some enemies and use your limited sub-weapons like throwing spears, fireballs, axes, etc. and make it further into the game world. There are upgrades, but it's mainly for your projectile count, and there are rings you can buy that add to your equipment that give you things such as iframes on your roll or the ability to destroy fireballs when you swing your weapon, but that's about it. Fight enemies, die a bunch, get upgrades to access new areas and previously found locations, and fight bosses. You get weapons such as the regular sword, axe, spear, dragon sword, and fire sword as you progress. The only good weapons are the axe, spear, and dragon sword, as they do more damage, swing fast, and have a very good reach. Examples of upgrades would be, for instance, the double jump, or being able to throw and set a block of ice in the air to create your own platform for tricky platforming. Another example would be using your rage ability to break impenetrable walls, both acting as a doorway through a passage horizontally, or using the ground dive, rage dive, to break the obstacle on the floor. The upgrades are pretty meh and bare bones, and it's purely for progression and backtracking. You're not going to be using it for battling much. Coin system is a pain and was not very well thought out, and neither was the sub-weapons. You lose a lot of coins when you die, and it costs 2,000 coins for something as simple as adding iframes to your roll, or 1,000 or so gold to let your weapons hit projectiles out of the air. You can cheese the system by just resting at your campfire, killing enemies, and resetting the area by saving at the campfire. Projectiles are pretty bad too. You get a limited amount of them early game, and they don't do any damage. They do less damage than just attacking the enemies. Projectiles are only kind of useful when you get the projectile count up later on in the game when you explore a little bit. There is a fast travel system, but only for the general area, so if you want to backtrack, you'll have to play the entire stage again, as you are not allowed to warp from campfire to campfire, which adds to the padding by the game, but it isn't too bad. There also isn't a local map, which can lead to a little confusion, but the game is small enough to where it doesn't suffer too badly. You just have to spend time retracing your steps to open up new shortcuts and pathways with the upgrades you unlocked as you progress further. The graphics are the highest effort portion of this game. The pixel art is simply beautiful and is by and large where the most effort was put in. There are old school TV and CRT filters in the settings, but I just played on the default filter 3. The in-game cutscenes, far and few in between, are pretty amazing, and the in-game stages and art direction is simply breathtaking. My most favorite stage was the snow stage. My least favorite was probably the snake castle or the regular castle stages, as they didn't stand out too much. The cemetery stage is quite cool as well, but not as much as the snow/ice stage. Music is limited, but in a good way, I would say. The main theme of Beholgar is quite good, and the returning home theme when used when exploring is quite good as well, and fits very well for exploration. Caves of Wonder and Death is a great theme for exploring the dungeons and castles. To Death They Shall Be Bound is quite good as well, and very catchy. Jabbar's Palace I didn't like, and Atop the Frozen Lands used for the snow stage is my favorite. Valley of Hemon or Hemen and Valley of the Serpent's Lair aren't as great. Boss's Slayer is a very catchy, upbeat boss theme and sounds like something out of a Disgaea game, particularly Prinny Can I Really Be the Hero, or its sequel. It sounds heroic and uplifting, something straight out of the NES era. The end credits song is also a very upbeat and journey reminiscing type of vibe. Overall, an above average soundtrack and above average graphics that you wouldn't really expect from an indie game. The sound design is good as well, and it does its job. I like the attack sounds and picking up item sounds. The upgrade sound when you get an ability sounds like something straight out of Vampire Survivors or something like that. The enemy hit sounds and death sounds are all pretty chunky and retro-like, and very satisfying to listen to. For the enemy and boss designs, they're quite generic, but I didn't really expect much difference from a game of this size or from a sword and sorcery perspective. Zombies, ghouls, flying fire spirits, snakes, poison spewing cysts and pustules, etc. The boss design is also the same, unfortunately. You fight a big guy, you fight a big worm, you fight a big snake, etc. The bosses can be easily defeated and aren't complicated at all. Without the iframe ring, it can get a little tough, but it's not something to bang your head against or difficult to memorize for multi-phase boss fights. Usually, the second phase is to just shoot their goo faster or do their attacks faster. There's not really a second phase for these bosses. The hardest boss I've struggled with was the snake in the snake castle because the area is small, it's filled with death pits, and the fire pattern it shoots is seemingly random, and it's a bit of a tank if you don't risk directly attacking it and only choose to reflect his fireballs back, which takes a lot of time. I cheesed the boss after dying about a dozen times, but I wasn't really frustrated at all. Overall, the enemy and boss design is generic and a little disappointing. The final boss is also nothing to shake a stick at either. Overall game balance and difficulty/fun factor. The game is quite difficult at the start as you are not accustomed to the control or game design. The developers throw its hardest enemies, the axe-throwing skeleton that tracks where you are and takes 3 or so hits to kill right in the beginning. Meanwhile, you only have 3 hits and you'll usually lose a hit point or 2 to the flying spirits or the skeletons that patrol a numerous amount of small islands surrounded by spikes and death pits. 3 hits is just a load of baloney, and the developer has a fetish for adding horribly placed enemies on edges or patrolling a small area where if you mess up even the slightest bit of timing and messing up where you land and attacking, you'll get hit. He also has a fetish for spike pits, leaps of faith, poison, especially poison in the snake castle, and overall very off-putting, very frustrating on purpose enemy placement and design. You can't say this guy doesn't know how to make his game because it's very deliberate how he chooses to place his enemies and where he chooses to put them. You'll die a lot, and I mean a lot in this game, until you start getting health upgrades and you find the better, longer reaching, stronger weapons like the axe, spear, or the dragon sword. The fire sword, quite frankly, sucks a big one. This is a common complaint against the game and it's quite valid. I beat the game in 6 hours, and the amount of bullcrap in this game, from disappearing platforms to awkward jumps and enemy placements to spike pits, made me not enjoy the game as much early on, or to be frank, at all. The game is simply not fun, and even later on, when you're aware of all the crap going on, you kind of just want the game to be over, which I felt very strongly. The enemies also quite frequently fly into your blind spot where you can't hit them with your sword, and you take unnecessary damage until you get the axe and other longer reaching weapons, and even then it's still an annoyance. Let's talk about the bugs, the annoyances, and my flaws before we get to the final section of this video, which is my overall thoughts. There are an enormous amount of bugs that have not been patched out and affect the game quite deeply that the developer does not care about. One visual bug is saving at a campfire and crouching at the same time will lead to you just ducking very fast while the game fades to black. There are also these 1 block high spaces, I guess you could say, where you can roll into, where there's usually a hidden area or whatnot. I know of one spot in the snow area right after one of the campfires where you have to force quit the game as you get stuck when you roll into the space, because it won't let you do anything. You can't open the menu or anything. When you swing the sword and the axe at the same time, the sword's swing will stay on screen and the axe will have an afterimage at the top of your head when you swing it. The key items you get are not properly aligned into your inventory, and when you jump off the pixel edge of a platform, the game will take your double jump and you will fall to your death when you realize you don't have a double jump anymore. The upgrade system is useless and should have been part of Beholgar's base kit, as it adds nothing to the game. A local map would have been nice, but it wasn't necessary. When you swing your attack, it's hard to time consecutive swings. There's an end lag, so you have to spam the attack button in order to swing so you don't get stuck. Weirdly enough, if you jump and swing as you land, there's no end lag. Very odd. Enemies fly into your blind spot where the sword can't reach, as I've mentioned, leaving the axe, spear, and dragon sword the only viable weapons. The inventory is genuinely useless and coded poorly. Your equipment doesn't even show up in the inventory, and the keys are out of whack and not in line with the boxes. Very sloppy and very lazy. Also, a big gripe is you can't go back to your current save after beating the game. After you finish the credits, you have the option to go back to your save file, but all it does is look at the credits. So if you want to play more, you have to make a second save and play all the way from the beginning. So if you want to continue playing on your first save file, right before you fight the final boss, make a second save so you aren't hard locked. Just giving a heads up, even though there's nothing really to do in this game besides collect the few hidden power-ups that you missed, which don't even give you an achievement, and there's only one side quest in the starting village, so not much to do. Overall thoughts is this game is a mediocre, bare bones Metroidvania with an above average soundtrack and graphics. The combat is jank, the early game is too punishing, and the later game is not stimulating enough with this basic formula. Bosses and enemy designs are generic and not interesting, and enemy/pit placement is needlessly frustrating, and the bugs are numerous. The weapons are not interesting, and the story is bare bones. I played this game on my Steam Deck and beat it in about 6 hours, and never plan to play this game ever again. think about it or even install it again. It's a baffling price at $9 and it's more worth it at the discount price of $1.79 on Steam, and even then I wouldn't recommend this game. There is a sequel that was just recently released, but I hear that the game has numerous bugs as well, which seems like a common issue for this developer. This game is not worth your time or money, and for Sword and Sorcery fans looking for a game, this was not it. Anyways, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. If you wish to support my artwork and my videos, all my social media and payment/tipping links are in my profile. More videos, more artwork will come regardless. Goodbye for now, guys.